Let's get corrupted. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Joe with Meteoric Serpents coming back at you for another episode of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast. Guys, great to be back. Another week down. This is episode number 97 of Colubrid Corruption. We're getting so close to that number 100 mark. It's coming soon. And yeah, I'm just super stoked. Had a good week this past week. I'm going to run through the intro before I talk a little bit about myself. I'm just going to give a rundown of what's going on here. But yeah, guys, if it's your first time listening to the show, make sure you hit that like button here on today's podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. Drop a comment. Let me know what your favorite part of the episode was. All that engagement always helps really great. We did hit 1,200 subscribers this week, which is awesome. Next goal is 1,300. Keep creeping up. I'd love to get, closer. It's definitely a reach, but I'd love to get close to 2K by the end of the year. I wonder if we can make that happen, but we'll see. Maybe some more YouTube video content and we can get there. But yeah, if you're not a YouTube person, which is totally cool, you can check out this podcast on all the major audio podcasting platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, all that good stuff. Go check us out on there. Leave a 5-star rating. Drop a review on there, share with your friends. That always helps out. And yeah, I appreciate you guys listening everywhere. I always keep track of the statistics and I see the average view count per episode slowly creep up, which is really awesome. It just tells me that more people are listening to the show, more people are enjoying what's going on here. So thank you guys for listening. If you guys are looking for good cause in the Colubrid community, you should definitely check out the CCR Conservation Fund. Go to colubridradio.com to find out more about this. But Dr. Loafman and his students are doing great work with conservation out in Iowa. And I know they have plans to expand into more projects with that. So if you're looking to put your money to a good place, a nonprofit, check out the CCR Conservation Fund on Colubrid and colubridradio.com. All the proceeds from the Colubrid Fest auction also go to this. So speaking of Colubrid Fest, guys, as always, Colubrid Fest 2026 is going down in Evansville, Indiana this year, September 25th through 27th. I'm so stoked, as always. Can't wait to see and meet you all there. I will be there vending. Our guest for tonight's show will be there vending as well. So will be a really good time to chat about that tonight. Maybe we'll talk a little bit because we met this past year at the last Colubrid Fest. So super excited. And yeah, so go check it out. You can find the tickets on the Show Me Reptiles website. So go check it out there. Guys, all my social medias are right here. If you're watching live, it's at Meteoric Serpents everywhere, but all those links are in the description as well. Go follow me on Instagram. It's the best way to stay up to date with what's going on in my collection. Well, not the best way, because the best way is if you go check out the first link in the description, because that takes you to the Meteoric Serpents Patreon. In there, you get a lot of exclusive access to what's going on here. First dibs on any animals I produce, discounts, the new giveaways I started implementing, ad-free episodes, pre-recorded episodes early when I do those. So lots of cool stuff, a cool Discord group chat with a bunch of cool people. So go check that out. Also, if you're just looking to support the show, lowest tier is $5 a month, less than a cup of coffee these days. So check us out. If you want to support the show, if you enjoy listening, it always helps. I really appreciate it. But yeah, and then our Colubrid of the week. Let's see here. Gonna share this tab. Guys, as always, this used to be the hashtag Colubrid Corruption, but the hashtags don't work properly anymore. So I'm just picking a cool Colubrid post that I see that week. If you're not on my radar, make sure I'm following you on Instagram, because I'm always looking for new people to shout out and animals to feature. Here this week, we have Chris Montross at Dark Horse Herp with I always mispronounce this, the Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana rat snakes, aka Western or Texas rat snakes. They're Texas rats in my book. They're Louisiana rat snakes in my book, but they're taxonomically the same with Texas rats. So I appreciate them as much as I do all my Texas rats, as you guys know. But yeah, this one's a beautiful example. Chris has been producing some banger animals out of this stock. So yeah, as always, shout out Chris. He always gets featured on these. But go follow Dark Horse Herp. He's been on the podcast multiple times. So yeah, thanks Chris for sharing this. And all right, I'm just going to do some general housekeeping. We'll say what's up to the chat and then we'll get our guest on. But I just got back from Florida. I spent a few days there. I went to Calvin Harris last night, which that my right, I'm like deaf in my right ear right now, but the concert isn't what did it. It was the plane ride. So I just got back a few hours ago. I'm actually feeling quite energized, obviously a day of traveling. And when I got home, I started pulling all the Texas rats and the other rat snakes out of brumation because it was that time. Probably gonna give first meals tomorrow, let them settle in. They'll feel the warmth in the room and start first meals. So really looking forward to that. And funny enough, I pulled the coxswain out last week because I was like, okay, these guys are, they're ready to go. They don't need as much cycling. I fed them a meal and I came back today, opened to tub to find a nice lock, and they've been locked for like hours now. So hopefully we get some coxswain production early this year. I'll be very happy to see that. Hopefully get that going. A few meals, and I'm would not be surprised if this girl starts developing follicles/eggs already. You know how they breed like rabbits. So yeah, looking forward to that. Otherwise, you can see my rhino rats behind me. They're the only ones I did not get like set up in their permanent tubs or enclosures, I should say, quite yet. That will be tomorrow's job because it's President's Day and I have some free time. But yeah, is that it for housekeeping? I think so. Yeah, the weather's starting to warm up, so there's a shipping window open, which means I'm sending some animals out tomorrow. So if there's something you like that I have, let me know. Hopefully we can get that to you soon. But I'm gonna say quickly, what's up to the chat? We got Keller here. What's up, Keller? Adam Ivory Clubrico, one of the Patreon members. Appreciate you, bud. Chris from Copperhead Reptilia. Thank you for tuning in. Amanda, also from the Patreon. Thanks for your support as always. Mason from the Patreon as well. Thank you, Mason, for always tuning in. Shane, above all scales, appreciate you, brother. And last but not least, we got Bosa. Bosa, good to see you, bud. Hope you're doing well. And yeah. All right, but that's it for the chit chat tonight. Let's waste no more time and bring on our guest, an OG of the hobby, Mr. Greg Maxwell. How are you?
Doing good, thanks. Hi, everybody.
Yeah. I'm very glad, or I'm happy you agreed to come on. Like I had mentioned, we met at Colubrid Fest last year. You were not a face I was expecting to see, so that was a pleasant surprise. We got to talking for a little bit, but that's where I kind of learned what you're doing on your collection side, and you're really taking a focus on colubrids now. So I was like, it's a no-brainer, and I saw that you're vending this year, which is really cool. So but yeah, man, before we get into everything, I have to ask the old origin story of where this all started. And obviously this has been a long-term thing for you over a lot of time. You could give as long or short as you want, but I kind of want to hear how everything started and how that got you to where you are today.
Sure. Well, we may as well go back clear to the beginning. I was 4 years old, and I had my mom cut out paper snakes for me, and I carried them around in a shoebox. I like to joke that I single-handedly lowered the property values on my street, but I don't have any explanation for that. I did not have a family member, an uncle or a grandfather or anybody that was into reptiles or animals particularly at all. it just was something that obviously was in my DNA. And so when I was about 8 years old, a friend and I went across the street from where I lived. There was a vacant field behind the houses over there, and there was a marsh area, and we would, go over there and collect tadpoles and frogs and toads, especially in the spring during the breeding season. And one day we flipped over an old mattress that was laying over there, and there was a pair of eastern garter snakes underneath.
Okay.
Those were the first snakes that I ever saw in the wild, and I was just electrified, is the best word for it. Completely fascinated, and my friend grabbed one, I grabbed the other. I took it home, and who knows? I don't remember at 8 years old what I found to put it in. It was probably an old wash tub with a window screen on top, which I'm sure it promptly escaped from. I don't remember keeping the snake for any length of time at all, but that really fueled my whole passion for interest in reptiles, and especially in field herping.
Okay.
And so from there, I began to put together a small collection of local native stuff: garter snakes, water snakes, northern brown snakes, all the stuff that you can commonly find here in Ohio. Um, and my family made a day trip when I was probably 13 or 14 years old to Mohican State Park, which is an area about 45 minutes north of me. Really nice area with the Mohican River winding through it. It's all evergreen trees and just a beautiful hilly wooded area. There's a hiking trail that runs from the camping and picnic area up to the base of the dam where the river is dammed up and forms a big reservoir. And we were walking along the trail, and of course, I'm at that age, I'm already keyed in on anywhere I go. I'm looking for herps and snakes in
Yep.
particular. And I heard a rustling off to the side of the trail, and this was high summer, so the weeds were all real dense and high. So I just dove into the weeds at the sound that I heard, and came up with an adult black rat snake. And
Nice.
it had the first third of its body hooked around a small sapling or a clump of weeds or something, so I couldn't really pull it free. But I firmly had the rear half of it in my hands.
All right.
And my dearly beloved late grandma Alice, who I had wonderful memories with as a child, was absolutely petrified of snakes. She would squeal and scream if one even appeared on television. And she had a piercing voice. She was an old vaudeville piano player and performer, and had a really loud voice. And I can remember her to this day just screaming and squealing. Uh, and my dad made me let the snake go, and I was just absolutely crushed. I mean, can you imagine being a 13 or 14
Yeah.
year old kid, your first real, snake? And and I marched back to the picnic area in silence and sat down on the bank of the creek and sulked for the rest of the day. So my dad felt so bad that they bought me a boa constrictor from a local pet store for my 14th birthday. And so
Okay.
that was my first exotic non-Ohio native snake.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing just kind of blossomed from there. Some of your viewers may recognize the name Don Hamper. Don was one of the original guys clear back from the 50s, importing snakes and breeding a lot of exotic stuff before anybody else had it. And I started working in Don Hamper's basement, cleaning cages and working for his exhibit at the Ohio State Fair when I was about 15 or 16. And from there, I fast forward to about 1988, 1989. Don actually started what is credited as being the first reptile show in the United States.
Yep.
And it's a small monthly show, still goes on. I just vended the show yesterday. And uh, so I started doing that show, I think in 1989 or 1990, as a cage vendor. My actual day job and occupation at the time was a cabinet maker and furniture maker. And I went to the show just to hang out. Somebody told me about it. And I noticed that nobody had any cages for sale.
Mm.
So I had always loved making snake cages. Even as a kid, I would go around to new construction in my neighborhood and trash pick pieces of plywood out of the burn pile, bring them home. The only saw I had was a coping saw, and if anybody knows what that is, it's a joke trying to cut cage parts out of plywood with a coping saw, but I managed to saw through and knock together some cages.
All
And
right.
so I'd always had a real interest in cage design. I was fascinated with the cages of the pictures in Caulfield's old books, Snakes and Snake Hunting and The Keeper and the Kept. So um, I brought some cages to that next show and immediately sold them all. People started asking me, "Hey, can you come back next month and bring 10 of this size or whatever?"
Oh wow.
And that rapidly developed over the next few months into a full-time cage building and distribution company called Cage Master. The Zirkles, I think you're familiar with Rob and Amy Zirkle here
Yeah.
in Ohio. They still use some of my old Cage
Okay.
Master racks with their colubrids. And that was a wild ride. That was my first really successful business. Ended up traveling all over the eastern United States. I did pretty much every reptile show east of the Mississippi River, all up and down
Gotcha.
the eastern seaboard, and had a pretty large colubrid collection at that time, and was probably my prize animals and most prized breeding success at that time was eastern indigo snakes. Some of my green tree python customers and fans might be surprised to hear me say that probably the most gorgeous reptile I ever personally have hatched is a baby red throat eastern indigo snake.
All right.
Just spectacularly beautiful and so intelligent and alert. I just love them. So, but I was introduced around that Cage Master time, 95, 96, to Trooper Walsh at the Breeders' Expo at the time was in Orlando. It's in Daytona
Yeah.
Beach now. And Trooper had a huge table full of captive bred baby green tree pythons. And so I bought one from him at the show the next month in Richmond, Virginia. And I just rapidly became completely hooked on green tree pythons. Many of you out there will know, that story, and that's what I'm probably most known for is my work with the green tree pythons.
Yeah.
Written a couple of books which have proved to be very popular and helpful to people out there, which is very rewarding to me. To hear back from people that have had breeding success because of the help that they've got from my books. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the journey and how it progressed for me. But I ended up selling the green tree python business in 2010.
Okay.
Um, that's kind of another story, but I was just ready for a change. I'd been breeding green tree pythons exclusively for about 13 years. My daughter was ready to graduate from high school. My wife and I were ready for a change because everybody out there with collections of reptiles and rodent colonies that go along with that knows how difficult it is to go on vacations or really
Right.
have an independent lifestyle away from animal husbandry. So we were ready for a change. And so I sold that business and was away from live herp keeping for a number of years, but got back into it a few years ago. A couple of buddies of mine were really getting involved with ball pythons. And I became really fascinated with the genetics of ball python breeding. And so that's kind of what drew me into them. I'd never really worked with them as a species. I've had a few over the years, but never had bred them. I think I purchased a gravid female one time many years ago and hatched out the eggs, but other than that, I had no
Okay.
real experience reproducing them. But after a couple of years of working with the ball pythons and getting my feet wet again with live herp keeping, I really began to experience a desire to get back to my very first love, which was the colubrids. And
Right.
so I began to do that. The first group I put together was some true locality hunt club OKT corn snakes. And from there, I just put together a small but growing group of favorite colubrids. I don't really specialize in any one particular genus or group.
Right.
I have a handful of things, but just some stuff I've worked with in years past that I wanted to get back to again, and some stuff that I'd always wanted to work with and just really never took the time or the effort to acquire them. And then there's
Okay.
some stuff that I worked with years ago that I just still love them, but I really don't have a lot of desire to get back in again. Um,
Right.
for example, I have no desire to get back into trying to feed baby gray banded king snakes.
Yeah, I hear
I
you
think
there.
they're
I know.
beautiful, but I've had my share of difficult species over the years, and some of the stuff I have right now isn't super easy, but um, yeah, just that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there because you've been
Sure.
through many stages of the hobby. I want to hear, when you were building that like initial collection, like you mentioned a few things like those Ohio natives, and then, eventually that got to, something as I'll call it elusive as like Eastern indigos. What did that collection like back then kind of look like? Where was your interest going in terms of species, and where were you seeing these things? Because obviously this was at like the forefront of the industry becoming what it is today, and there were just
Sure.
animals like, everyone was going crazy with all the species they can get. So I want to know what your kind of interest was back then, actually.
Sure. Well, you're right. There was just a ton of stuff being bred for the first time, and you would go to, Don's local reptile show or any of the bigger national shows, and just, stuff that you'd only seen pictures of in books when you were a kid. I remember my parents, when I was very young, bought our family a set of World Book encyclopedias. And of course, the first thing young Gregory did was opened up the S volume to snakes. And the very first picture was a full page picture of a pyro, an Arizona mountain king
Okay.
snake, coiled around a pine cone on the end of a pine branch.
Hmm.
And the photo was taken by a very famous herp photographer, um, Will Penny. I believe that's
Okay.
how you pronounce it. And that photograph as a young kid was one of the other things that just really captured my imagination and attention. So, when I would go to a show and I would see an Arizona mountain king snake for the first time in person, because as a kid, I would walk around my neighborhood scouring pine trees to try to find one because the only picture I'd ever seen was one coiled around a pine cone. And as most of you probably know, that is not the that's not the habitat for those. They're
Right.
mostly found in mountainous areas under rocks and stuff. But anyway, I didn't know any better. So, to see all that stuff at shows, I just really put together a very broad collection of tons of tricolor stuff, all kind of king snakes, milk snakes. The one group that I really didn't get into too big was Pituophis,
Okay.
if I'm saying that correctly. I never know
Yep.
how a lot of this stuff is really pronounced because you never hear anybody say it. You just read it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that stuff was kind of big and messy for my taste and the room
Sure.
that I had to devote to it. The indigos were the exception, and got a couple of interesting indigo snake stories we can get into regarding caging and stuff. But
Sure.
I had, pretty much if it's a colubrid that's being bred commonly in captivity, I had it,
Okay.
back in the early '90s, and bred a lot of that stuff. But then I began to in 1996, 1997, I began to phase out colubrids and go exclusively with green tree pythons. The
Got it.
indigo group was the last of my colubrids that I sold.
Okay. Now, before we segue from there, I do want to hear like back in the 90s. Now, obviously you were designing like the cages and that stuff. Were you building rack systems, and is that how you were keeping a lot of colubrids? Like what was that kind of like for you at least?
Sure. I designed and built both rack systems and display type cages. So,
Okay.
and I had my collection in a mixture of both. Um, in my experience, snakes will thrive in either setup if they're set
Yeah.
up correctly. I have all of my colubrids currently in a rack system, but I do provide cork bark hiding areas, aspen substrate, and the snakes seem to thrive. They love the
Yeah,
hides.
for sure.
But I also love putting stuff in display cages with a more naturalistic appearing environment as well, provided it can be kept clean. I do see sometimes stuff kept in cages that, as a long term keeper, I'm wondering how do you ever keep that clean, like
Right.
without stripping it clear down. But
I've
anyway,
wondered the same myself because I'm a rack primarily rack keeper. Like that cage back there, that's literally the only one I have in this room, and it's for a rhino rat snake. But yeah, I do wonder sometimes with those big intricate cages, how the hell do you clean that thing without taking the whole thing apart?
right, yeah. But anyway, I designed and built both. We did a ton of racks, ton of display cages. Yeah, we had a whole line. 24-inch cages, 36, 48, 6 foots. We
Awesome.
did incubators. We did arboreal cages, pretty much everything.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, very cool. And then, getting into the green tree pythons, obviously, I've heard Rico's name a lot as being a very influential figure in that. Were they just that mesmerizing for you that like you put everything else to the side and went full force on green trees?
Yeah, like I said, I saw my first ones at I think it was the 1993 Breeders' Expo in Orlando. And then the following month, I purchased a trio of yearlings from Trooper in Richmond, Virginia.
Oh,
And
Trooper,
then
I'm
he and
sorry. I said Rico. That was my mistake.
yeah, Rico's a good guy that was in there too. But yeah, Trooper is probably considered the godfather of
Yeah.
North American green tree python breeders. So yeah, Trooper introduced me to them. He sent me some of his technical papers that he had written in the late 70s when he had first started to import and had his first successful breeding, which was in 1977. So very shortly after I purchased my first trio from him, he invited my good friend Phil Black and I, and some might recognize that name. Phil wrote the foreword for the second edition of my book, The More Complete Chondro.
Yeah.
But Trooper invited us down to the National Zoo where he was employed as a keeper. And they had a few green tree pythons on display at the zoo, but they had dozens back behind the scenes. And so when I went behind the scenes and did the tour back there for the first time, I really saw the diversity of color and pattern. So he had, some really high blue, some high
Yeah.
yellow, what I would call high contrast, which would be like yellow, white, and blue all in this and green all in the same animal.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just just like those first garter snakes that I flipped under the mattress when I was a little kid, I just was completely mesmerized by these green arboreal snakes. And
Yeah.
I actually had sort of a negative experience getting into arboreals. I had picked up a pair of Amazon tree boas in trade from a guy. And I don't think the guy really knew they were problematic. I think it was a legitimate, trade, but they ended up regurging on me. And
Ah.
at the time, I didn't really know a whole lot about that regurg syndrome with them, but it's a common thing and pretty much incurable. And so those animals ended up having to be destroyed because they were just languishing and were going to die anyway. And so I swore to myself, man, I'm never touching expensive arboreal green snakes again. But Trooper was able to really, convince me that the issue with those is that they were probably imported, first of all.
Yep.
Secondly, there's a difference between the emerald boas and the green tree pythons. They're different animals, and that properly kept captive bred animals were very likely to thrive. And so
Yeah,
he convinced me
absolutely.
to give it a shot. And but yeah, I was just completely fascinated with them, and just to the point where I certainly didn't lose my love or interest in other species of snakes, but I just wanted to focus on doing as much as I possibly could with that one species.
No, absolutely. And you know, it makes sense. It's hard to spread yourself thin with things, especially when, you know, the care and the species themselves could be so different. Like, you know, I had MJ on, what was it, 2 weeks ago, and you know, I've seen his collection evolve over time, and now he's down to green trees, emeralds, and ball pythons, which for his room I think is going to be like his best bet, and he's dialing down on everything. So, you know, hearing that you did that makes total sense to me. I mean, even in fact, myself, I'm actually downsizing on my pythons fully, and I'm going like full colubrid because I just think it'll be a lot easier for me, and just everything combined to really hone in on that stuff.
Right.
So yeah. Um, and you know, obviously, you know, we said we talk about conjurers, but I have to ask, even on the Colubrid show, you know, where did both the inspiration come to write the books, and you know, what was that process kind of like? Because it's not some small feat to write a whole book and then do it again. Um,
Right.
Especially when science is involved, you know, there's a lot of things at play. So, you know, where did that whole thing come into play for you?
Sure. Well, it really started with my building a website. I started building a pretty extensive chondro website in 1998, I believe it was.
Okay.
Another good buddy of mine, Tom Phillips, was a IT professional and web designer. So he built a website for me just as far as the shell, and then taught me how to add content. And so I just really worked hard at developing that into a full resource. So by the time it was fully developed, I had my entire breeding colony pictured with background details on each animal. I had cage plans for constructing chondro cages with cut lists for the materials,
Okay.
just tons and tons of information. With Trooper's permission, I hand typed in his entire introductory paper from 1977 on his first successful U.S. breeding and his history with importation. And I added that to the website. So it was this huge resource.
Yeah.
And then that really started to draw a lot of people into what I was doing and with the animals I was working with. And then Tom Phillips and I started a chat forum, the Chondro Web forums. It
Okay.
broke out into multiple forums later, but it was originally just the Chondro Web forum, and it had over 1 million hits, I think, by the end of the first year. Um, there were a couple of other chat groups that were not green tree python specific, and so I think we provided a platform where just chondro people that were interested in just talking about those could come
Sure.
and talk, share pictures, information, and everything. And as is always the case on a forum like that, you develop into a large membership that's comprised of long-term people that have been on there a while with a lot of experience, and then mid-term people that are gaining experience and experiencing their first breeding success, and then new people that are constantly finding the group and joining. And so you have this constant inflow and state of flux, and so you end up answering a lot of the same questions over and over and over and over. And I've been on some groups, like I used to ride motorcycles. I've been on motorcycle forums and
Yeah.
guitar forums. My current day job, well, I've actually retired in October, but for the last 16 years,
Congrats.
I've been a guitar repair and restoration guy. So I've been on guitar forums, and there's always a tendency to tell the new people, hey, just do a search in the archives, when we've already answered that a million times. And I never wanted our group to be like that, because as a person that's experienced that as a newcomer on other groups, you want to feel like your question's important and people are interested in helping you. So I got to a certain point where I thought, maybe it would be good to take all of this information that ends up being reiterated and repeated a lot and putting it into a book form, so that people would actually have a hard copy resource with the answers to all these questions and
Absolutely.
stuff. So I was in a reptile show as a cage vendor in 2002 in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. And Bob Ashley from Eco Publishing had a table there. And I was walking around during a break from my table, and I saw Bob's card, and it said Herpetological Publishing. And so I said, hi, I'm Greg Maxwell. I work with green tree pythons. And actually, I think by that time I was probably at the show vending as a green tree python guy, now that I
Yeah.
remember it. And so I said, I breed green tree pythons, and we've got this really busy, chat group. I've got this huge website. I cover a lot of the same information. I'm interested in writing a book. Would you be interested, in talking to me about that? And Bob said, yeah. He said, why don't you, when you get back home from the show, send me like a, table of contents or a skeleton, format of what you want to talk about. And so I went home and did that. I like wrote a quick foreword and then a table of contents, and then just like a one paragraph encapsulation of what I wanted each chapter to include. And I
Got it.
think when I first approached Bob, he probably had the idea in his mind that this was going to be like a paperback little booklet kind of thing. But when he saw the scope of what I had in mind, I think he realized, wow, we could like really make this into something really cool.
Yeah.
So he told me to go ahead and do it, and that he would like to do it as a full 300 plus page hardback book with a dust jacket. And that's kind of what I had in mind from the beginning. But I was ecstatic to hear that Bob was going to give me the green light for that. So it took about a year to get everything done, and there's just a lot that goes into writing a book, a lot more than just writing the copy. There's
Absolutely.
photography and layout and bibliography and sourcing different pieces of information that you need to credit other people for. And so we got that first edition out, and it really is kind of a bittersweet story, because the book was supposed to debut at the 2003 Breeders' Expo in Florida.
Yeah.
And I actually had people that flew in from Europe to
Oh, wow.
get signed copies of the book, and the printer completely dropped the ball and did not get the shipping set up in time. And so the show ran Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the books all arrived at the hotel on Monday.
Oh, man.
So we had no books to sell at the show. Of course, a lot of people were disappointed and frustrated, none more than I. And but I did have an advanced copy of the book that the printer had sent me, kind of as a proof, for proof reading, to make sure everything was 100% right before the print
Yep.
run was started. So I was able to bring that book with me and set it up as a display. And so I took a bunch of advance orders at the show, and then shipped them all later that week when I
Ah,
was able
okay.
to get cases of them. And then Bob told me that title sold out more quickly than any title that they previously published,
Wow.
which obviously to an author, that's really exciting. People think that you make a lot of money as an author. You don't make a lot of money writing a book, but what you do get is an intense amount of satisfaction when it's
Absolutely.
well received, and the community responds positively and says, hey, this is really helped me. This is exactly what the community needed. And so the book sold out pretty quickly in about a year. And Bob approached me about doing a second edition rather than just reprinting the first edition. So the first book was called The Complete Chondro. And I kind of have a very dry sense of humor, and I love word puns and little word jokes. So we called the second edition the More Complete Chondro.
Yeah.
And if there's ever a third edition, it'll probably be called the Even More Complete Chondro. But yeah, the second edition just sold out last year. So unless you
Oh,
can
wow.
find one on eBay or Amazon, they're not available anymore
I'm
from the
happy to say
publisher.
I have a signed copy of the More Complete Chondro.
Awesome.
Um,
So yeah, that's kind of how the book came about. Yeah, it
all
was
right.
just an evolution of information.
Very cool. And I promise we're going to get to colubrids after this, but I have to ask this question. I had this conversation with Dr. Loafman because he wrote a book a few years ago. He's writing a book currently. With you being, a herp author, I'm curious what your thoughts are on like the state of material that material information that gets out there to keepers. Um, like are more books with like updated information, like is that something that you think will continue to be good, or is that being taken over by like podcasts and stuff? And then I've heard people buzz around ideas of trying to make websites with just having like as much detailed information about species or whatever it may be as possible. Or do you think we'll just see like a combination of all of this, and hopefully that all works in nice harmony for the average keeper? I just threw a lot
Sure.
at you. I'm sorry.
No, that's perfectly all right. I freely admit I'm an old school guy, so I like books. I like
Yeah.
the way books feel. I like the way books smell. I have, a number of what would be considered classic titles in my small herp library. So I'm biased in favor of books, but I don't think books are ever going to go away.
I
Um,
agree.
I I kind of set the precedent with my book doing a second edition and calling it, more, because my book, quite happily to me, spawned an entire library of titles published by Eco Publishing under the complete heading.
Yes.
So, like the next book was the Complete Ball Python and the Complete Boa Constrictor, written by my good buddy. Oh, I'm drawing a brain fade. Um, he had the
I have
fire
to say
last
I am
year.
too.
Vin Rousseau.
Oh yeah, Vin. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, Vin. So, and I don't know how many titles there are now, maybe 12 or 15.
Yep.
But now some of those books have followed form, and they're doing second editions called the More. So we now
Yeah.
have the More Complete Boa Constrictor, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's kind of set the pattern for, though, at least the eco line of books continuing to perpetuate. And I would love to see that happen, with other publishing companies and titles as well. But certainly, that we're in the digital realm of podcasting and everything that's available now with AI. So that's not going to go away either.
No, for sure.
My feeling is the main thing is that we have the information out there,
Yeah.
and the animals are benefiting from it, and keepers' enjoyment of that as well. And if those are being accomplished, it doesn't really matter to me what the format is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because the way I've looked at it, and I'm a younger person in this hobby, and I have a small growing library of some herp books. Some of those books being on the older side, some of them being newer. Um, and I think like the hardcore like nerds that like really love this stuff, like will always keep buying books, and I can speak for myself, I probably will. Um, I just love to see more updated information be on like these hard copies, because like there's some old books, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with like Klaus's books about rat snakes, but like those are some amazing titles, but they some of the information in there is outdated. They
Right.
were created a long time ago, whether it's taxonomy, just actual species and whatnot. So yeah, I don't know, I think it's an interesting question. But yeah, I think we'll keep seeing things come out, and the people that are willing to write them, God bless them.
Right.
Definitely,
I know
definitely tough
Craig
work.
Trumbauer, who's a big name in
Yes.
colubrid breeding, just came out with a new book.
Yep.
And I'm sure that's going to be a very popular book and a bestseller too. So yeah, I think we're
Absolutely.
going to continue to see books come out.
Cool. All right. Time to get back on track.
Right.
So your current collection, and yes, the way when we started talking about doing this episode, what you kind of said to me is, a lot of people are always asking me on podcasts to talk about green tree pythons, but no one's ever wanted me to talk about like my original true love, which are colubrids. So I'm glad to be the first one to do that. But as you kind of segued and transitioned these collections, and now you have the ball pythons and the colubrids, you said it was some of those classics that really got you back into it. You mentioned Okatee corns. I just want to know, like, what are some of those species that you are keeping now? What inspires you to keep them, and just what are your plans?
Sure. Well, one of my true original loves is Okatee corns, and probably a great many people that listen to this podcast are aware that there's true locality Okatee corns, and that name originated from the Okatee Hunt Club and was written about by Caufeld's book in 1957.
Yeah.
And then there's any really pretty orange corn snake, regardless of heritage, that's referred to as an Okatee, kind of as a form or a morph.
Yeah.
So I am not a locality. I don't use this term in any negative sense at all, but I'm not a locality snob. Um, I love locality stuff. I love the concept and idea of locality. And I do have some verified locality colubrids, and it's always my preference to work with a locality verified population with something that I'm drawn to, provided the locality animals are attractive.
Yeah.
And in some cases, like one of the projects I'm working with is Baird's rat snakes,
Yeah.
and I think you used one of my hypo
Sure did.
Baird's in the thumbnail for the there it is. And
Yeah.
credit where credit's due, that animal was produced by my good friend Antoine Burke.
Yep.
And I have several of those from him, both visuals and hets. But in my opinion, his line breeding for color has produced some spectacular animals that I haven't seen equaled in locality Bairds. So that might be an example of a project where I've gone more with the generic line breeding for color than
Sure.
for locality. But most of my stuff, I have some locality groups. So starting off with the Okeetees, I have all four phenotypes of the true locality hunt club, corn snakes or red rats. I actually prefer the name red rat snake.
All right. Yeah.
We have black rats, gray rats, yellow rats, and then corn snakes. And it's like, come on, they're red. Let's call them red rat snakes. But that's like ball pythons. I greatly prefer the name royal python, but that's never going to happen. Like 10 million people know them as ball
Yeah.
pythons, and that's what they're going to be called. And corn snakes are going to be called corn snakes. But
I might have to disagree with you on the ball python one. I think I'd prefer to stick with ball python, but
do you? Okay.
to each their own. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no right or wrong on that. It's just personal preference and bias. But the four phenotypes or four appearance patterns of hunt club Okeetees is, of course, the wild type, which is everybody's familiar with that.
Yeah.
And then there's the albino form. And these four phenotypes were all produced from true locality animals that were collected primarily by my old friend Howie Sherman.
Okay.
And they were also there's also some other names working with those same lines. So when I say these are phenotypes of the locality animals, these were not line bred in order to introduce these traits. These all popped up randomly and unknown to the original breeders in their original locality lines. So
Okay.
there's an albino form, lovingly referred to as a red zeppelins,
Yep.
which is a name that I think that name was suggested by Craig Trumbauer
Okay.
to Howie Sherman and another guy that I've known for a real long time, Tony Dongera. And so the albino form of the Hunt Club Red Rats is this red Zeppelin form, and it's actually different looking and different as far as captive breeding history than a lot of the other, reverse OKTs or albino OKTs that are out there.
Mm.
And then there's also a hypo version, which is referred to in the hobby as sun-kissed.
Okay.
And the sun-kissed Hunt Club red rat snakes are different than the sun-kissed that was originally produced, I believe, by the Loves, Bill and Kathy Love. And then the fourth is a double visual, albino and hypo, and those are known in the hobby as phoenix corns. So I have breeding stock for all four of those, and
Okay.
really, really excited to produce those. I'm going to be producing all this stuff for the first time this year. All my breeders I raised up from hatchlings, and so I've been raising them up for the last 2 or 3 years, and they're all just getting ready to come out of brumation right now. So
Very nice.
I haven't actually produced a colubrid myself since the early and mid 90s.
Okay.
But I should have a pretty nice group of stuff this year. Of course, you know how breeding snakes goes.
Yeah. Things happen.
Best laid plans of mice and men often go astray, no pun intended. But so I should have all four of those this year. And
I'm gonna be on. Oh, I was just gonna say quick. I should. Well, how do I phrase this? I'm not super in tune with the corn snakes, but I wasn't familiar that there was that hypo line that came out of the Hunt Club stock. That's actually news to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Continue on.
There's information online if you want to look it up. If you go to Tony Dongera's Facebook page,
okay,
which I believe is just under the name of Tony D Reptiles. And if you go to his photo albums, there's a couple of photographs that are clearly text and not pictures of snakes. And
cool.
If you open those up, he goes into the history of all of those phenotypes and
all right,
where they came from. Yeah.
Nice.
But I know Howie Sherman popped out the first red Zeppelin. It was just one out of a clutch of a number of normal babies. And he had no idea that, that gene was floating around in there. I don't think the parents were even hets because you didn't get the percentages that you would have gotten if the parents were heterozygous. So it was just clearly a
spontaneous.
New
yeah. That I always find that really cool when that happens in captive collections.
Especially when it happens with a locality animal.
No, absolutely. Just because, obviously we're so in tune with the mutations that it's like het this all the time. And it's like it either is or it isn't. And then when something just pops up totally randomly when the parents aren't het, because I'd be very curious to hear if that same pair ever reproduced another one just with that that thing, or he had to raise that one up just to recreate all the albinos from there. But no, that's super cool.
Yeah, I'm sure at one point in time or another I was communicated with about all those details, but I don't remember.
No, that's totally okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
awesome.
Yeah, and I think I've got, I don't know, eight or 10 pairs of Hunt Club corns. And so then from there, I think my next purchase was from a guy that you featured at the beginning of the podcast tonight, Chris
Yep.
Montrose from Dark Horse Herps. So he was actually getting out of all of his red rat snakes except for locality animals.
Yep.
And there's a line out there called Extreme, which has hunt club roots, but they've been outcrossed enough that they can't really be represented anymore as pure locality. They've been line bred for color and stuff.
Yeah.
So I bought a pair of Extreme corns from Chris,
Nice.
and that introduced me to some of the other stuff that he was breeding. So I got a pair of amelanistic Everglades rat snakes from him that are pure locality.
Yep.
And Chris has information, on his social media about the source for that group. But the female was actually a wild caught amelanistic female. And the color saturation on his amel group is just
Oh yeah.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful snakes. And so, yeah, I have a visual female and a 50% het male that I got from him. So that's not really a group. That's just a pair, but that's another little project I have. I've always, as I mentioned, I've always loved the pyros. Was always fascinated with that. And I think I called him Will Penny, but it's Roy. Roy Penny was the photographer
Okay.
that published the picture in World Book Encyclopedia. But I've been fascinated with those snakes ever since a little kid seeing that picture. So I have a group of those. I have two wild caught animals that are a locality pair, and I have two that are F1s from pure locality animals that were captured and bred by Gerald Merker.
Okay.
And then I also have a small little group of morph pyros, some Applegate
Nice.
hypos, and some double het albino and Applegate. So I've got that little group. I have 2.2 Cape gopher snakes, and I mentioned earlier that I have never really been a Pituophis keeper, but the exception is I've always loved Cape gopher snakes.
Yeah.
Kind of a funny story when my buddy Phil Black, who I mentioned previously, he and I were at a show somewhere. It might have been the Columbus, Ohio show. We were somewhere. It was at the end of the show. Everybody was tearing down, and we were walking around, and there was a guy packing up his stuff, and he had a pair of yearling Cape gophers, a male in one container and female in the other. And Phil, we had never seen him before.
Yeah.
Phil says, "Oh my gosh, what are those?" And the guy says, "Oh, those are Cape gopher snakes." And Phil goes, "Oh, I've got to have those. How much are they?" We've laughed about that for years because that's not the way to get the best price on anything.
Yeah.
Somebody, I've got to have that. How much is it? So he bought those, and I ended up getting some from somebody else. And I bred those back in the 90s. And my son,
Nice.
who was a local fifth grade science teacher, actually had one of my Cape Gopher offspring in his classroom for like 15
Oh
years.
wow.
Yeah, it just died not too many years ago. So I have two yearlings from 2024 and two hatchlings that are now inching up on yearlings from 2025. And love those animals. They're just beautiful.
Yeah,
Um,
the vertebralis seem, they seem a little hard to come by these days, which I find interesting.
yeah,
I have a feeling though it seems like people are interested in them. I have a feeling in a few years or so they'll start uh being in some more regularity in, availability wise.
right. Yeah, if you do a search for them on Morph Market and look at the archives of all the historical sales, there have been some that have been made available from time to time, but
Yeah.
they're by no means common. At any given time, you can look for them, and there aren't any available.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's probably going to be another year or two before my oldest pair is ready to produce. They're they're one of the more challenging colubrids that I personally have.
Right.
Um, I have found if you push meal size on them at all, they have a tendency to either regurge or um, pass partially undigested rodents with like maybe the tail and a little bag of skin. There's
Okay.
never any nasty smell like you get with a full blown regurg. So I keep meal size for them very small, and I have found they do a lot better on fuzzy rats than they do mice. I think
Interesting.
the hair must irritate the GI tract a little bit. That was something that Rob Zirkle turned me on to. He's like, try them on something without hair. And since I've been feeding them fuzzy and very small rat pups with almost no hair, I haven't had any more digestive issues with them. But I would classify them as a little more sensitive. They're not just garbage cans that you can feed
Right.
every 5 days and push a lot of growth on them. You have uh, to be careful with them.
Yeah. All right. Cool. And yeah, they stay a little bit smaller too, right? So they're not, your big bull snakes
Right,
that are those garbage cans. So
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think an adult Cape gopher snake's about the same size as an adult corn snake.
Right.
Yeah, not real big. But the colors are beautiful, and like I think a lot of snakes from that family, they chill out pretty well as they get older. They're just little psychopaths when they hatch.
I'm
I mean,
sure.
yeah, you open up a tub and they almost fall out of the tub, striking and hissing at you. When I got my first pair and brought them home, from picking them up at FedEx and unpacking them, I had to keep cardboard on the front of the tub for 3 or 4 days
Oh
because
wow.
I would walk into the room and they would immediately start to hiss and strike at the front of the tub if they could see any kind of movement at all. But my oldest pair now, they'll be 2 years old this year, and they still tail rattle and hide, when I open the tub up. But I can pick them up now without them hissing and striking. And as I recall, they get pretty tame as full-grown adults. The uh, animals that I had back in the 90s I had no trouble handling them at all. And
Yup.
the one in my son's classroom, the kids all handled it and everything. So yeah,
Nice.
I'm looking forward to having those as adults.
Cool.
So I've also got a group of red milk snakes.
Yeah.
We've got some Johnson County and some Jackson County um, animals that are locality specific, right? And then I also have a pair of het hypo from the Bloody line.
Okay.
Got those from David Dean,
Yup.
Temporalis
Yeah.
Incorporated. So, um, yeah, in there somewhere.
Yeah. I'm just scrolling through to look at stuff. Is that a
Yeah,
Jen I hear?
I try to do
Oh
a
no, transmitter.
mixture of stuff on my Instagram. I don't, just do all ball pythons or all colubrids. I mix it
Yeah, for
around.
sure.
But yeah, there's one of the red zeppelins right there.
Oh, one of these.
Yeah, right
Yeah.
there. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
yeah. But I love the red milks. They're a beautiful coloration. They're one of the milk snakes that actually get better as they get older rather than developing the black tipping and getting a little duller.
Mm.
So I really like that about them. They're typical milk snakes. They're really squirrely to handle, and um, they'll come flying out of the tub if you touch them
Yeah.
at the wrong time, But really pretty. They eat great. They're growing like weeds, and so I really love those. Oh, let's see what else I have. I have something that I picked up at Colubrid Fest last year that I first fell in love with again back in the 90s, had some back in the 90s, and hadn't seen them around at all recently. And in my experience, even harder to come by than the Cape Gophers. and that is the Aurora house snakes.
Yeah.
I picked up a female there, and still looking for some more of those. Just have the one female right now, but they're just a beautiful little house snake, and my favorite house snake of all time. And so really excited about acquiring more of those animals and putting together a group of those.
Yeah.
Trans-Pecos rat snakes, always have loved those. I've
Are
got a
those
pair of
also from
those.
Antoine?
I believe my animals came from Antoine as the breeder, but I acquired mine from Phil Black.
Oh, okay.
And they belong to Phil. They're just here on breeding loan.
Okay.
Phil's got room for them now, but when he first began acquiring some colubrids, he didn't have space. He was actually living in an RV by choice, not by economic design. But he didn't have room for snakes at the time, so I ended up with a lot of stuff from him on breeding loan, including some ball
Okay.
pythons. So when he got his snake room set up, he's actually in the house now, got a snake room set up. He's like, "You feel like sending those Trans-Pecos back to me?" And I'm like, "No." I feel like keeping them and breeding them and then sending them back to you. So
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna split the clutch, obviously, but I have a normal pattern and then a blonde, and I think
Nice.
both of them are het for axanthic.
Okay.
And then Phil's got, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 different forms of Trans-Pecos. They're probably his favorite snake. Both of us were fascinated with them from reading Kaufeld's chapter on hunting them down in Texas. We read those books when we were kids, and so we've developed a love for them early on. And I'll be putting together a bigger group of those as time goes on. Right now, I just have the pair.
Yeah.
Um,
I have to ask this while we're at this piece here. How are you kind of diverging your care between animals like, you have your corns, and then you have animals like the Trans-Pecos, which kind of need to be drier, more humid, and same goes for the vertebralis, if I'm not mistaken. So what is how do you do that in your collection?
sure. I am using VE racks, and I have double stacks. So, like for example, the VE6, I have a double stack 6 and 6. So I'm able to independently control the temperature in the bottom half and the top half.
Okay.
And then, of course, everything at floor level is just cooler anyway than
Yeah.
stuff at upper level. So I kind of place animals in the racks based on their temperature and humidity requirements. I also drill a ton of ventilation holes in
Gotcha.
my tubs. I put up a post on Instagram once that showed some of my tubs being drilled. And I found this cool thing called a step drill at the hardware store. So it's like a cone shaped thing. And as you progress up the cone, it drills bigger and bigger diameter holes. So
Mm.
I only use the first two, which is, I think, an 1/8 inch hole and a 3/16 hole. But I drill a lot of holes. I even had somebody comment on my post and said, "Man, what are you keeping that needs so much ventilation?" And I'm always nice to everybody on social media, whether they are polite or not. But I wanted to say everything everything
Yeah.
needs a lot of ventilation. Even high humidity animals don't like stagnant,
No,
you
for
know,
sure.
moldy, whatever. So I provide a ton of ventilation. To me, that's an important part of keeping animals in a rack system. I see a lot of racks where there's just like one row of holes in the front of the tub, and I'm not criticizing that. If it works, it works. But for me, I have 3 or 4 rows of holes, and I use as large a hole as I can get away with the species of snake. So for like all of my adult corn snakes, they're all getting a 3/16 or 1/4 inch hole, and just multiple holes all the way across the front, down the sides. And I never have, like, if an animal, every once in a while, everybody has an animal that fills the water bowl with substrate or dumps it
Yeah.
over or whatever. I never get any condensation that build up in my tubs because I have adequate ventilation. And as you mentioned, the Trans-Pecos rat snakes, it's well known that they need a lot of ventilation and low humidity. And I wondered how successful I would be with them in this setup because I run an ultrasonic mist humidifier in my reptile room primarily for the ball pythons because
Yeah.
I get dry sheds really fast if I don't do that. And interestingly, even running that, I can still get dry sheds on some of the more delicate colubrids. So, for
Mm.
example, any of my red milk snakes, as soon as they go opaque, I take a paper towel and get it pretty wet, not dripping wet, but wrung out wet, and just lay it in there on top of the cork bark hide and replenish it, every day or every other day. And if I don't do that, like even with 55, 60% humidity in my room, my red milk still get dry sheds on.
Interesting.
So I just, I really just kind of mix and match and see how things do. And but I do make sure to keep the stuff that needs a little cooler on the bottom of the racks, and everybody
Yeah.
gets a lot of ventilation.
What's your go-tos on substrate?
I use aspen
Okay.
on pretty much everything colubrid wise.
Yeah.
Using cocoa bark for the ball pythons, but yeah, aspen. I really like the aspen a lot. It's
Yeah.
very easy to clean. Clumps up really nice, for feces and urate deposits. And back in the early days when we were kids, we always used pine shavings. And
Right.
people say you shouldn't use pine shavings, and maybe you shouldn't. I don't know, but I kept a lot of snakes on a lot of pine shavings for years and never had a
No,
problem
there's a
I know of.
there's a lot of people who still keep on pine shavings, and I think
Okay.
that's actually a myth, to be honest, because there are people who high level people who do it with no problem. Like Montross is one of those people. He keeps many things on pine without
Mhm.
issue. So yeah.
And I do have to say this too, and I know this from using pine shavings for my rat and mouse colony. There's clean and dry pine shavings, and then there's pine shavings. You open up the bag and it smells like turpentine. And
Yeah.
I do try to avoid the brands and types that have a really strong pine odor for my rodents. I don't keep any snakes on it, but yeah, I get a huge bag of aspen at the Columbus Reptile Show
Yeah.
for I think 20-25 bucks, and it lasts me a long time. I'm not breeding hundreds of snakes either. I think I have 50 or 60
Yeah.
animals in my colubrid collection, um, but yeah, I use aspen, and then I use a cork bark hide in all my tubs,
Okay.
which I get from I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it's the Virgin Cork Bark Company.
Okay.
I looked at a lot of cork bark wholesalers because that stuff's expensive.
Yeah.
It's outrageous if you pay retail for it. But I found this company that wholesales it, and I get a pretty big box of it. I think for like $90, and
Oh
it's
wow.
it's all like 8 or 10 inch wide flats that are 3 feet long, and I bandsaw them up to fit whatever size snake and tub I'm using them for. But I
Nice.
love that stuff because you can scrub it in a sink with a toothbrush, and
Yeah.
snakes urate on top of it, and it gets all down in the cracks. Take really hot water and a stiff toothbrush and scrub it. It scrubs right out, and you can even boil that stuff if you want to, or bake it in an oven. And it looks great. The snakes love it. So that's what I use in all my tubs.
All right. Very cool.
Yeah.
And what's the care on the Aurora house snake been like? Are you keeping that like your ball pythons?
So I have that set up in my colubrid rack with the other colubrids. I'm using aspen substrate with a cork hide, but I do have about a third of the tub with damp sphagnum moss
Okay.
and a separate piece of cork bark over top of that area. and a small water bowl. And I would say that snake is probably 80% of the time in the damp moss.
Mm,
And after a while, it kind of gets mingled in with the aspen and gets kind of
right.
chunky, and then I replace it. So I'm thinking about resetting up that tub with maybe half the tub with sphagnum,
Okay.
and maybe doing like a Rubbermaid, a small Rubbermaid sandwich box or something, just to try to keep the moss from separating from the aspen and not getting mingled together.
Sure.
But he definitely likes the moist, cool area of his
Okay.
habitat.
Cool. Very nice. Um, did we miss on any of the species that you're currently keeping?
Gosh, let's see.
I was just scrolling through your Instagram quick. I'm
Yeah,
thinking no.
I think we got everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, first year back on, you know, breeding colubrids. How does that kind of feel, going through the stages of brumation? You mentioned you're pulling stuff out probably next week.
Right.
Um, how did you wind up doing brumation this year?
So up above my outbuildings, I have a regular stick built 40 foot by 20 foot building separate from my house that has been my guitar repair shop for the last 16 years. But actually, I've only lived here 8 years, but
Okay.
yeah. So last 8 years here, that's been my guitar shop. But it has a finished attic, and when I first got into back into snakes, the finished attic was the only space I had anywhere to put anything. Our house is very small. We downsized. We're both retired now. Our kids are gone, so we have a fairly small 1,500 square foot Cape Cod type house with no extra room in it for herps. I don't have a basement.
Okay.
So I had to find a place to do snakes out in the exterior building. So I had moved all the ball pythons into the finished attic, and for a couple of years, that's where they all were. So my guitar business was roughly divided into two halves: the repair and restoration half, and building custom acoustic guitars.
Mm,
And the last 2 or 3 years, I've gotten so well known in this area for repair and restoration, of which there are not very many people that do that, especially that do it well. So I got so busy with that I no longer really had time to build guitars anymore. And so I decided to downsize the shop and get rid of all of the building
okay.
dedicated jigs and templates and machinery and everything. So that allowed me to divide the downstairs in half, do the guitar repair on the front half, and turn the rear half into a regular reptile room with a normal ceiling. And because the finished attic has a vaulted ceiling, you can only stand upright right in the middle of the room.
Got it.
Everything else has got sloped a ceiling, and you can't stand up. It was hard on the back.
Yeah.
And it's so when I moved down into that downstairs room, I was like, man, I felt like I died, went to heaven. I've got an actual sink with hot water, and
Yeah.
so life was much, much, much easier. But that left that finished attic room up there empty, and so it was just a natural thing to turn that into my brumation room. It does have an exterior window. Um, Outside of that finished attic space, there is a little area where my furnace for the whole building sits. So the furnace is not on the ground floor, it's upstairs. And I did have a little bit of trouble getting that brumation area as cool as I wanted it because the ambient temperature from the furnace bled in, even though I have an insulated wall separating the snake room and brumation room part of it. Um, the heat from the furnace area still bled through the wall, and
Okay.
so even we just got through having an excessively bitterly cold January here in Ohio, much colder than it normally is.
I
Um,
felt you there.
yeah, we had like 7 or 10 days when the actual temperature was zero or below zero. with wind chills like 15, 20 below zero. And
Yeah.
even with those temperatures and my brumation room window open and a fan in the window blowing cold air in, I only got it down to about 52, 55 degrees. I
Okay.
think I hit 48 degrees a few times. And I have a thermometer that I bought to where the base unit sits in my main snake room downstairs, but it has a sensor up in the brumation room so that anytime I'm in the main snake room, I can look and see what the temperature is in the brumation area.
Yeah.
And I did get it down to 48 a few times, but most of the time it's hovered between 52 and 55. And a few days it's been, 58. I've kept it below 60 the whole time. So you
It's good.
you more modern and experienced colubrid guys can tell me whether that's adequate or not, but I'm
No, that
hoping that's adequate.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I put
That
everything down the beginning of December, and I usually bring it back up the first week in March.
yeah.
That's how I've always done it over the years. It seems to work.
Yeah. I mean, I heard nothing wrong there, and getting the temps in that range should more than have done the job for the stuff you're keeping. So yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So that's awesome. And yeah, hopefully, I'm looking forward to seeing what you're able to produce this year. How many total pairs of animals do you think you'll have going on the colubrid side?
Let's see. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10 pairs, probably.
Nice.
Maybe a little more. I'd have to count, but that's pretty close to it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
I'm
And
uh, I'm
obviously,
trying I'm trying to avoid the trap of going crazy and getting more animals. Not that what I can take care of, because I can take care of whatever, but that I want to take care of, that I enjoy.
sure.
I don't want to have to get up and go, oh man, I've got, half the snake room needs cleaned and I'm burned out. I'm trying to
Yeah.
avoid that. So I'm trying to keep everything manageable. And my next, 5 to 10 year plan is probably to do a little less ball pythons and a little more colubrids.
Think that sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously, it's a little bit of a difference. Not that you're not used to it, but out of those 9 or 10 pairings, a lot more snakes than you would have with 9 to 10 ball python pairings.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
yeah. What do you think for new people as they're getting in, jumping in with like a clutch load of, let's say, 9 to 10 pairings like that, especially on the colubrid side of things? Do you think that's good if people have that on their first year? Do you think that's a little overwhelming, or?
I think it really depends on what their prior experience is.
Yeah,
At this point in my life, I know exactly what I'm getting into.
absolutely.
I know what the time commitment is for one clutch of corn snakes. So,
Yeah,
if I produce 6 clutches, of those, and 2 or 3 clutches of pyros and a clutch of subox and, whatever, I know what I'm getting into. I know what kind of time commitment I'm getting into. For somebody that's newer, it's always better to start slower and build up rather than to overdo it and find yourself overwhelmed, overwhelmed with time, overwhelmed with trying to afford, a million pinkies,
yeah.
or produce that many. I have a small mouse colony,
Okay.
not real big. I have 16 tubs of rats and 6 tubs of mice, and I think I have a male and 4 or 5 females in my mouse tubs, and it always allows me to have live of any size I need for the ones that'll only eat live.
Yep.
But I'm actually not producing enough to completely feed my colubrid collection, so I have to supplement by buying frozen. And
No, sure, but just having the accessibility to pinkies is honestly a game changer. Like fresh
yeah,
pinkies. readily. I just last week's episode, I don't know if you saw, we talked a lot about breeding rodents, and I'm just like, man, I wish I could even have just a little bit, because it's just such a game changer. I think on the
It is.
colubrid end, I mean, definitely on the ball pythons, just because they're so readily willing to take live over frozen thawed, but the colubrids too, just having that source, because you go through pinkies faster than you think, especially when you're
Yeah.
pumping out clutches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I find out this year it's a little more, than I wanted, I can always back off a little bit next year. But now that I'm retired, it's way easier.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, so I can go out and spend a half a day in the snake room and everything's great. Whereas if you're working a full time job and doing reptile breeding, which a lot of people do. I did it for years and years,
Yep.
um, you just have to be careful it doesn't get away from you.
Yeah. Well, with that said, with that retirement being relatively fresh for you, does that make you want to do more on the snake side, or are you still kind of like taking it slow and kind of just seeing how it goes for now?
I'm transitioning. I've been self-employed for the better part of 40 years,
Yeah.
and I'm a highly driven person when it comes to building my businesses and quality and customer service. So I told my wife, I said, just get ready. I'm telling you ahead of time. I'm not going to be able to like flip the switch and immediately become this laid back retired guy that, you know, doesn't have some days where I'm just driving you crazy because I don't know what to do. So far,
Right.
that hasn't happened. But I'm transitioning into the whole thing slowly, and really enjoying being able to spend. I'm probably spending the same amount of time in the reptile room as I was before, but
Hmm.
it's a lot more at my discretion when I do it.
Sure.
Instead of doing it, from 5 o'clock till 9 o'clock at night, in the summertime when it stays light later and the lights are on, that late. Now I'm doing it, from, on some days I'm doing it 9 in the morning until lunchtime, and you're fresher. You're not tired from working all day. It's more enjoyable. So from that aspect, it's better. But it's again, I'm resisting the urge to go. Man, I'm retired. I can quadruple my
Yeah.
my snake collection. I want to be wise about it, and
Sure.
I've really enjoyed the species that I've picked up. They're all stuff, like I said, that I've either worked with before or target species that I've always wanted to work with. And my goal at this point, I think, is to add species rather than add more individuals of the same species, with a few exceptions. Like I said, I want to put together a group of Transpecos. I want to put together a group of the Aurora snakes.
Yeah.
Like I got plenty of corn snakes. I've never really been attracted to the just dozens and dozens of all the different corn snake, morphs and varieties. I think
Right.
a lot of them are spectacularly attractive. And, for the people that are working with all of those, I say, go for it. More power to you. But I'm just going to stick with the hunt club stuff.
Yeah.
So, I've got plenty of those, and, enough pyros, and I don't know. I might pick up another pair, trio of the capes, but all in all, I'm working with a group of 5, 6, 7, 8 individuals of each species, and I'd rather work with a diverse variety of stuff than have 20 or 30 of the same thing.
Sure. Are there any other species out there that are on your radar that you don't currently have?
I have some things that I've looked at that I'm kind of on the fence. Do I really want to take on the challenge?
Okay.
I have always loved speckled racers.
Okay.
Um, and it's hard to get captive bred ones.
Yeah.
There's usually some wild caught ones available. I talked to a guy in the UK that's actually worked with them, and he told me, "Run! Don't get them. They're terrible." Um, so, I don't want to get into anything that eats lizards
Okay.
or that requires lizard scenting.
Yeah.
Um, I have a soft spot for all animals. I know everything has to eat, but I really hate it when I have to put down one animal to feed another animal.
Sure.
So I've got a decrepit, like almost completely picked bare chick from back when I was scent feeding a baby green tree python that somebody
Okay.
sent me that was a problem feeder. And I have a scent lizard in the freezer and a scent frog, and it just kills me to have to put something down like that in order to use it as a scent tool to feed something else.
Right.
So I'm trying to stay away from, like I mentioned, the gray bandits. Um, and the speckled racers, I might pull the trigger on those just because they're so beautiful. And
Yeah.
I think if somebody did establish a captive bred group of those, I think that would be a very popular animal that would be really easy to sell. Once you got them feeding and established for people. So that's kind of something that's on my radar. I would love to get back into indigo snakes. I just don't have the room for the
Fair.
the cages that they require. I mentioned earlier I had an indigo cage story.
Yep.
So
Go.
when I got my first ones, I think I had them in 4-foot cages that were all open with pine shavings as a substrate and big cork bark hollow logs for the hides, and they seemed to do great. I mean, they fed great, and everything. But I had the usual trouble with breeding that a lot of people have with those infertile clutches and or just not producing any even slugs. And so I got to thinking about it, and I thought, what could I do to maybe better replicate the gopher tortoise burrow habitat that they're known to use in their native area? So I redesigned a cage that was 6 foot long, and 4 foot of that cage area was exposed with a glass panel in the front, UV light overhead, and a small heat panel in the ceiling. And then the other 2 foot section of the cage was divided off by a solid wall inside with just a crawl through hole. Um, Adequate for the snake to fit through, but not real big. And a solid door on the front of the cage so that the snake couldn't see out, nobody could see in. It was a dark nesting area. And
Okay.
I had hoped to, by doing that, to replicate, the gopher tortoise burrow. So there was no heat provided for the nesting area other than whatever ambient, temperature got in there from the room.
Right.
And so I had the UV lights on a timer and the heat panel on a timer, so everything went off at night. I provided, I think, shredded newspaper in the nesting area, but there was enough in it that they could like get down in it, burrow down in it. And to my satisfaction, they started behaving exactly like you would expect wild indigo snakes to behave. They would come out and lay out with about 2/3 of their body out of the hole from the nesting area when the lights came on in the morning, and they would bask. They fed really well, and then they would disappear at night. And I produced successful clutches from 2 females 2 years in a row with that setup.
Awesome.
And so I just found out recently. Do you know Dean Alessandrini? Or have you heard of him?
Not familiar with that name.
Dean's a Colubrid guy down in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
Really interesting guy. Does a lot of gopher and pine snakes. He does red milks. He does a handful of stuff. But he used to breed indigo snakes a number of years ago. And I published a story about my cage design and my breeding success in the now defunct Reptile and Amphibian magazine, which was a little small publication that was out, a number of years ago. And Dean read up my article in there and built those cages for his own animals and successfully produced in them.
Mm.
And then he was called down as a consultant to it's either Georgia or Florida. There's a society down there that's working with indigo snake repopulation and conservation.
The Orion Society, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to try to say it, figured I'd butcher the name, but yeah, the Orient Society. And I have not verified this, and I want to get in touch with him and verify this. But Dean told me they actually had him down as a consultant when they were setting up their breeding program because they knew he'd successfully been breeding them. And he introduced them to my cage design.
Mm.
And he told me that they're actually using my cages down there now to breed indigo snakes. So if that's true, that'd be really cool to find that out. I'd love to.
You can likely fact check that with Dr. Loafman. If I had to guess, you probably could.
Okay. I've been planning on just, reaching out to them through Facebook or something.
Yeah.
But yeah,
or that.
I could check with him. Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome.
So I also have a very funny Maxwell family indigo snake story. So like I said, I had all these, I had 4.4 adult animals. So, I had these 8 cages, stacks of 4, 2 stacks of 4 cages. And I would go out of town every weekend to reptile shows with my cage business.
Yep.
And my teenage boys had the job of cleaning colubrids on Saturdays. That was their chore to do. So they would clean tubs and clean cages. And so I got home from a trip out of state for a reptile show. And I would always get home usually on a Monday because I would, leave the show.
Right.
If it was a Saturday show or if it was a Sunday show, whatever, I'd drive home out of state, get home Monday. And I would usually feed Monday or Tuesday. And so get all the, the rodents out to thaw and everything. And I'm getting ready to feed indigo snakes and pop open one of the cages. And you know what's coming. There's no snake in the cage.
Yeah.
And so I'm opening up the nest box side and I'm rooting through, how hard is it to hide a 6-foot indigo snake, but I'm still trying to convince myself it's got to be in here. So I'm rooting through the paper, everything. And
indigo might be one of the worst colubrids to get lost within a colubrid collection.
Wait till you hear the conclusion of this.
Okay.
So this was in October. Okay.
All right.
So I get my oldest son. His name's Gideon. I said, Gid, I'm like, one of the indigo snakes is gone. And he's like, well, when I went down there to clean Saturday, the door was open. And I thought you just took it to the show with you.
Oh,
no.
No.
I'm like, no. And I'm like, we've got to find this snake. I said, your mom is going to kill me. My wife does not like snakes.
Yeah.
And so at this time, my entire basement was, the colubrid, keeping and breeding area. So we scoured the basement. Oh, I mean, we went through everything, the rafters, like underneath, behind everything. Then we went upstairs to my office, which is like a 5 or 6 steps up out of the basement to my office. We scoured the house, every room in the house, could not find that snake anywhere. And I'm like, if that snake's in the house, we would have found it. This is a big snake. They're active. So my wife gets home, we have to tell her, she freaks out, And so I'm like, listen, we're going to keep looking. I said, but I don't think it's in the house. So in our basement, we have what's called here in Ohio, a sump pump.
Yeah.
You guys have those too?
I don't, but I'm familiar with.
Yeah. So it's a hole in the concrete floor of the basement, usually with a plastic lining, and there's a pump down in there. And when the water table gets so high, the pump kicks on and it pumps the water out of the house and out into wherever, the yard or the woods, or where we lived in the woods at the time. And I'm like, that snake had to go down the sump pump. And,
Okay.
those drain tubes like feed directly underneath the foundation of the house and they drain out into the woods. You can walk out into the woods and see the end of the pipe. I'm like, this snake's long gone. It's going to die, October, it's cold at night. So my wife hosts her entire family at our house during Christmas. And there was a lot of them. So we would always have people sleeping on the floor in sleeping bags, and the guest bedrooms are all full and everything. And she's like, we can't have the family in for Christmas, And I was like, listen, calm down. I know this is upsetting, but I'm like, if we haven't found that snake by December, like it's dead or gone, right? So she's like, all right, all right. She's like, do we tell them? I'm like, no, we don't tell them. They're all going to freak out. So they all come for Christmas. My wife's on pins and needles. Go through the holiday season, no sign of the indigo snake.
Okay.
They all leave. My wife's like, whoo, and I'm telling her, I'm like, it's gone. We're never going to see it again. So December, January, February, March, April. I'm down in the shop, which I had a half a mile driveway. My shop was about halfway between my house and the road. So I'm
Okay.
down in the cabinet shop doing something, probably building snake racks. And we had an intercom system so that up at the house, you could buzz who was ever down in the shop. This was in the days before cell phones.
Yeah.
So we just, you would buzz the buzzer, and the person down in the shop or the house would pick up the phone and you could talk to each other. So the intercom buzzes, pick up the phone. My middle son, Dan, says, you better get up here. Mom found the indigo. So I go tearing up, in my car up to the house. I go running in the house. God. My first question is the snake okay?
Yeah.
She found it by opening up the lid on the washing machine where she'd just done a load of laundry and pulled a big, wet, warm load of wet laundry and an adult indigo snake out of the washer. The only thing I can think of is that snake was underneath the washer on that particular day. Like it couldn't have been there for like 6 months, but it was in between the cabinet and the tub. And when the cycle ended, it crawled up and got into the tub with the warm, wet laundry.
That's nuts.
And she pulled out that laundry. And
you gave a lot of situations with how I thought the story was going to end, and then
right.
you really just twisted it there.
Yeah, you think it's going to end at Christmas time, but yeah, no.
I thought you were going to find it at the ends of the sump pump, in a sleeping bag. Now, right. Okay.
So she lets out a blood-curdling scream, and my boys were in the house. They were like, Mom found the snake. So, I come running up. I get the snake. That snake was as fat and shiny as the other 7 that I still had in the cages. Okay. And the only thing I can think of is when I would thaw out rodents, I would lay newspaper out on the floor and lay out, like 100 thawed out, rats and mice. And that snake was probably helping itself. And because there were so many, I didn't notice, whatever was missing, because it had to have been eating. It was so fat and, fat and sassy. And shortly after that was when I made the departure into green tree pythons.
Okay.
And to this day, my wife has told me you can have any snake you want, but you're never getting an indigo snake.
Oh, man.
She hates them.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, oh, they're so beautiful. And when the snakes fall, she doesn't care.
That's a good story. That's a good story for sure.
Anytime, I've not had many escapes. In all my years, we've been married. We're going to be married 46 years this June. I've probably had 3 or 4 escapes in those 46 years. She's found every single one of them.
Oh, boy. That's even worse.
We have a joke now. Yeah, if a snake gets out, just send Mom, because she's going to be the one to find it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I have some kind of like wrap-up questions for you. So obviously you've seen the history of the hobby, over time for a while now. I want to hear like what are, what, how do I phrase this correctly? What's the best thing that's evolved in the hobby over time, like from back then to like now? And then to reverse the question, what's something that like you really liked about it back then that you don't see as much now?
Sure. Great questions. Um, I think the answer to the first part would be two-sided, and that would be both the availability of animals
Yeah.
and the availability of information. Like I said, in the late '80s, early '90s, when captive breeding was really starting to explode, it was just like living in an unbelievable dream to go into a reptile show and see Sinaloan milk snakes and Pueblan milk snakes and eastern indigos and gray banded king snakes and speckled king snakes and California king. I mean, we'd never seen any of this stuff live before, other than maybe at the zoo.
Yeah.
And so the plethora of species and morphs that are available now to the hobbyist is just really mind boggling, and I think is a really good thing. And then just the spread of information. You can find really good quality information on almost any species. Just like me, you know, looking at getting into speckle racers, and I was able
Yeah.
through, an hour and a half of digging around online to find somebody in Great Britain that actually worked with them and be able to have a chat conversation about that.
Right.
That just didn't really happen on a widespread basis back then. So if I were to cite one or two things I think now that maybe negative is too strong of a word, but that I don't think is quite as good, is first of all, young people today, I think, don't have the heritage that a lot of us older guys and gals have of spending our youth field herping.
Yeah.
Like I think most people today spend most of their time online, morph market podcasts, and I'm all for that. There's nothing wrong with that. But I have such a deep appreciation of seeing live reptiles in their native habitat because that's how I grew up. I mean,
Yeah.
I spent every waking moment from, March, as soon as the chorus frogs and spring peepers started to emerge, until, the last garter snake disappeared in October. I spent every waking moment out in the fields, ponds, lakes, streams, hunting snakes, frogs, turtles, and, taking pictures, bringing some home to keep, just really getting to know what native looking reptiles look like in their native habitat. That kind of leads to a second thing, and this is going to sound really strange coming from a guy that pushed green tree python morph breeding, to new levels and extremes. But I think sometimes we've lost the beauty of how animals appear in the wild without all of the captive bred morphs and bizarre patterns and things that have been produced. And
Yeah.
with continuing hypocrisy, I don't hold that true at all with ball pythons. I'm like, the stranger and wilder the better.
No.
Although I do have to say, I produced 5 or 6 hypo het pied baby balls in 2025, and those are real close to what wild type look like. The hypo brightens them up a little bit, but they're
Yeah.
still basically tan and olive green
Yeah.
animals, and I think those are so pretty.
Yeah. I
um
love hypos. I
yeah,
do.
I mean, they're so pretty. The mom's pretty. I could easily just keep one of those if I was just going to have a pet ball python. But yeah, I love all the wild ball python morphs and combos and everything, and I'm playing, with all that stuff within the genetic groups that I have. But when it comes to colubrids, I love morphs and morph breeding, but I also love how the animals look like uh, they look in the wild. And so I don't want to see people so caught up in trying to buy or produce the next wild looking morph that we forget about, hey, this is an eastern garter snake. This is just a cool snake right out of my backyard. Northern
Sure.
brown snake, black rat snake, corn snake, all of Chris Montross, water snakes and stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned what I'd like to get into next. I could go crazy on his Neurodia.
Okay.
Um, the thing that's holding me back is the feeding. I
Okay.
don't want to breed hairless mice,
Yeah.
and I don't want to chop up worms and fish.
Gotcha.
So, and in talking to him, yeah, he told me that's kind of what you have to do, especially the hairless mice. Apparently, their GI doesn't do well with furred rodents.
Yup.
But oh, I do know something I am going to get into that I wanted to mention. Um, there is a guy, I forget his name, but he produces these screaming orange and red Eastern hognose.
Okay.
And the Western stuff has really never appealed that much to me. But I've always loved Eastern hognose. I've had a few
Yeah.
over the years that were wild caught. But this guy has just some outrageous red and orange line bred hognose. And so I am planning on picking up a pair or a trio of those this year if I
Awesome.
can afford it. So that's something that's on my
Nice.
radar too. But yeah, I really want to always remember that the naturally occurring wild caught locality stuff is just as beautiful as anything that we mix and match as herpetoculturists, mad scientists.
Sure. Cool. Um, all right, another question for you. This is one I haven't done. But since you've seen like different sides of the hobby, the green trees, ball pythons, all that stuff, what are some of like the top things from the colubrid world that you think the other segments of the hobby can pick a piece from, if that makes
Uh,
sense?
I'm not exactly sure. Not exactly sure what you're asking me.
So
Like,
I don't know,
what
just
do the green tree python people need to gain from the colubrid people? Is that kind of what
yeah,
you're?
even just something like whether it's our mentality, just the way things are done. I don't know if you think there's something distinguishing in the colubrid community that you think other, some of the other segments of the hobby can maybe learn from. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I do think that we need to avoid the mentality that the species I work with is like the best or the only thing.
Yeah, fair.
And if I ever showed any of that kind of attitude with green tree pythons, I would regret it. I don't know if I did or not, um, but each group of keepers and breeders that has their own stuff that they specialize in, they focus on. Um, I just love the diversity. You
Yeah.
know, you get around, Craig Trumbauer and his passion, for the gopher snakes and bull snakes and pines. I listen to him and I want to go out and get all gopher and pine and bull snakes.
Yeah.
And then I'll I got hooked up with Joel Reap and David Deem, and it's like,
Yup.
man, you know, pyros and milk snakes, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
And then I get around the garter snake people, and I'm like, oh man, I could do nothing but garter snakes. So I just think each group has its own passion. It's really the same passion underneath. It's just what happens to catch our eye and move our hearts as far as species goes. But um, the one thing I think the green tree python community has really been able to share with the rest of the herp world, and I think is a valuable thing, is lineages.
Yeah. That's
Keeping
something
lineages.
that's something I've always said on when it comes to Morelia, but specifically green tree python community is how well they do that stuff. And I wish some people could incorporate that more on the colubrid side.
Right. I do too. And some people have. I love the Hunt Club red rats, just love
Yeah.
how they look and everything. But one of the things I especially love that makes that project more interesting and valuable to me, just like it did with the green tree pythons, is how people like Howie Sherman and Tony Dongera and some other people have kept the lineages for those animals. And like,
Yeah, and even like not even just the like actual like yes, keep the lineage pure, but like even as simple as the lineage charts that the green tree python people put together. Like I wish we saw more visuals like that
right,
across all segments of the hobby. I think that would do really good wonders both on advertising and to just information sharing.
right,
I think people would benefit on like selling animals so much better if they had nice charts like that.
right. And I'm planning on doing that as much as possible when I sell
Yeah.
colubrids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Cool. Well, Greg, I have one last and final question for you. It's the question I typically ask everyone, but I'm going to reword it this time to make it I think a little bit better. But why do more people need to get corrupted with colubrids? Why are colubrids so cool?
Well, gosh, there's huge diversity. Um, typically, they're obviously there's exceptions, but typically they're easy to keep. They feed well, they breed well. Um, I don't know. Those are probably the top two things for me. Is just
Fair.
the incredible diversity. You anybody that's involved in herps at all can find a colubrid species that speaks to them.
Yep. Agreed.
They may not do it, they may not want to do it, but they could if they wanted to. You
Yeah.
look at just the vast diversity. King snakes, milk snakes, garter snakes, water snakes, bull snakes, pine snakes. Those are just right off the top of my head. Racers.
Yep.
I mean, I've looked at breeding coach whips just because I'll be on Morph Market and I'll be like, I wonder what's on the coach whip page. And it's like, here's a guy with a captive bred coach whip. And I'm like, ooh,
Yeah.
no, I can't do 6 foot cages. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's just so much diversity. And if you want easy, there's easy. If you want challenge, there's challenge. If you want a little of both, I mean everything in between, you can get into whatever level of color and challenge you want with colubrids.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it here. It was fantastic. We're coming up on 2 hours here. Greg, any closing statement for the audience here before we send it off for the night?
I just really appreciate you having me on. Uh, like you
Absolutely.
mentioned at the beginning, everybody understandably likes to talk to me about green tree pythons, and I still love to talk about green tree pythons. But I appreciate you having me on because I love colubrids too. They were my
Yeah.
my first love, and really enjoying getting back to them. In my older age, and so really appreciate that. Um, I really appreciate everybody out there that's following me on Instagram or Facebook or Morph Market, and has sent me emails or messages of encouragement, support, or just to say hi. A lot of times I have people approach me, like I'm too busy to talk to them, and I'm never too busy to talk snakes with somebody. So
Yeah.
I always enjoy that. Um, and so, yeah, just peace and love to everyone.
Awesome. Well, Greg, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me tonight. For everyone listening, the link to Greg's Instagram is in the description. Please go give him a follow. Tell him you enjoyed the episode, because I know I sure did. But yeah, guys, that's a wrap. This was episode number 97 of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast. Guys, please leave a like on today's episode. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Go follow both myself and Greg on Instagram and other social media places. First link in the description below takes you to the Meteoric Serpents Patreon. Go check that out and support the show. But yeah, guys, that's a wrap. This was episode number 97 of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast with Greg Maxwell. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll catch you on the next one next week. Peace out.